Greetings, and thank you for joining us at Inmates For Change. My name is Jones. I'm the CEO, founder of the 501c3 not-for-profit Inmates For Change. We offer reentry services for individuals who are returning from incarceration and those of us who are in the community who have convictions for felony offenses in their background and are having a difficult time transitioning back into family, community, society, corporate America. Inmates for Change offers a 12-week curriculum entitled Path to Purpose, where we offer curriculum topics at a 12-week type of semester, which runs throughout the year, 4 times a year. What we're offering are critical thinking skills. We introduce individuals to interpersonal interaction. We do self-image and positive self-worth. We work with relationships issues as well as behavior modification and vocational training linkage. Tonight is again another special segment, of course, dealing with reentry. I have come across many conversations where individuals are in restorative justice and working with this oppressive state that we have found ourselves in along the lines of reentry and fair criminal prosecution. Tonight I have a guest by way of phone. His name is Mr. Marc Maurer. Mr. Maurer is the executive director of the Sentencing Times organization in Washington, D.C. I believe that Washington, D.C. Northwest. I could be wrong, but what I'm going to do is ask Marc. Hopefully I got it right. We're going to take a few questions, and I'm going to get Marc right on the line. Marc, are you there?
I'm here, and the Sentencing Times is our newsletter, and the organization is the Sentencing Project.
I knew that.
Yeah, I know you did.
I apologize. But Marc, are you guys on northwest, southeast, northeast, or southwest part of Washington, D.C.?
We're in Northwest. You
Northwest.
got that exactly right.
Okay, so 2 out of 3 ain't bad, huh?
Right.
Okay, Marc, I just want to reach right into it with your your fall 2017 issue of Sentencing Times. There's a headline, the number of people serving life sentences and how it has nearly quintupled. And when I saw that, it just shocked me. You know, I was watching, I was reading the news article, and I was looking at a program that was on TV that was discussing mass incarceration as well as unfair sentencings being issued. Can you give us some light on the topic for the article with the number of people serving life sentences and how it has nearly quintupled?
Yes, well, it's a very disturbing situation. There are really 3 different types of life sentences that people can be serving. There's life without the possibility of parole, life with the possibility of parole, and a category that we call virtual lifers. And by virtual lifers, we mean someone who's got a sentence of 50 years or more to serve, even if they may be eligible for parole. And we've done a number of studies of the people serving life sentences over the years. And the most recent research we released this year shows that 1 of every 7 people in prison is serving a life sentence today. 1 of every 7. That works out to 200,000 people serving life imprisonment.
Those numbers are amazing. Go right ahead. Those numbers are amazing.
Well, and as we're seeing increasing calls to challenge mass incarceration, I find that encouraging. But, we're not going to be able to end mass incarceration just by sending up some diversion programs for people convicted of drug offenses. That's important and necessary, but we also need to look at the deep end of the system, people serving decades in prison and often long past the point at which they might be any sort of threat to public safety.
Wow. And I know the situation is, like you just mentioned, is going to get worse before it gets better, or there's not going to be any improvement at all for a minute, which also leads me to the second portion of the article. There was the periodical that the Sentencing Times issued for the fall 2017 publication. The federal sentencing reform debate that's shifting under Trump, and what does it mean for returning citizens, those who are incarcerated, those who are in the criminal justice system, and those who are yet to be justice involved?
Yeah, well, it's been pretty disturbing, and that's probably not any surprise to your listeners. Um, Attorney General Jeff Sessions comes from a long career as a hardliner when it comes to criminal justice policy, and he doesn't appear to have changed very much since becoming Attorney General. Just a few items of what he's been doing. Under the Obama Justice Department, they had announced that they were phasing out the use of private prisons in the federal system. They didn't need them anymore, and they also recognized that there were serious problems in safety and security, both for individuals behind bars as well as the staff. So they're going to phase it out over a several-year period. When Mr. Sessions came into office, he almost immediately announced he was reversing that order, was happy to be contracting with for-profit prisons, and thought there was nothing wrong with that. Subsequently, he issued a memo to his federal prosecutors around the country on how they charge criminal cases. Whereas when Eric Holder was the Attorney General, he required that federal prosecutors use their discretion in the service of justice. So essentially, if there was someone who'd been arrested, charged with a drug felony, if there was reason to believe that the person was not high up in the drug hierarchy, did not have an extensive criminal record, then Holder asked federal prosecutors to avoid charging them with an offense that would carry a mandatory minimum prison term. For drug offenses in particular in the federal system, 5, 10, 20 years and longer is very common with the mandatory sentences.
Yes.
So Holder asked that they cut back on that, which the federal prosecutors did, and there were considerably fewer people convicted of an offense involving mandatory prison. Along comes Attorney General Sessions, says he wants his prosecutors to seek the highest provable charge in any case. So not looking at individual circumstances of the crime or the person, but just the highest punishment you can get in any case, which doesn't necessarily mean that's justice. It means it's punishment. So it's really a reversal of some of the reforms that we've started to be seeing at the federal level, and can only result in higher numbers of people in federal prison, higher numbers of people there for a drug offense, expensive prisons, separation from families. It goes on and on like that. And
Yeah.
that's what that's about.
That is a sad commentary, I tell you, because what it sounds like to people of color is a modern day slavery, and it's not going to change until we start mobilizing and advocating for fair treatment, as well as producing resources and services in our communities where we can have some type of diversion from the prison industrial complex, and or being justice involved during our lifetime. So speaking of that situation from the Sessions and with the Trump administration and what it looks like, I'm going to draw our attention to the Newsday article by Nicole Porter and her article on private prisons don't save money and they don't make us safer. Would you care to give us a comment on that about the view from the sentencing time or the sentencing project and what you all are making heads or tails of it with that for our viewers?
Sure. Nicole Porter is our Director of Advocacy at the Sentencing Project, and the argument she's laying out about private prisons, now there are more than 100,000 people today who are locked up in a private prison in the United States. Uh, and the private prison contractors don't care where they get prisoners from. So, for example, the state of Hawaii has a severely overcrowded prison system, so they've contracted with private prison operator in Arizona, and so they put hundreds of prisoners on planes, fly them over to Arizona to complete the number of years of their prison terms. So this means, of course, that they're not going to get any family visits there. If they have a legal case pending, it's going to be very difficult to meet with their attorney. If they want to plan for their reentry coming home, it's going to be very difficult to do that. So the private prison operators are making a bad system even worse. And, one of their main selling points is they come to states and say, we can do it cheaper than the public prisons can. And then they're telling their stockholders, we're also going to make a profit for you. So how do you do it cheaper, and how do you turn over a profit to your shareholders? Well, most of the money in running a prison goes to the staff, the corrections officers and the other staff who work there. So it means that you pay your staff less, you have higher turnover, you give them less training, all of which is exactly the opposite of what any good corrections professional would say is needed. Prisons are very tense institutions. You need to have people working there who have maturity, who have insight, who have education, who have some idea of how to relate to other people and an incentive to do that. So private prisons fail on all those counts, and we've seen the results. In many private prisons, there have been serious incidents of abuse, neglect, people being hurt. In many cases, could have been avoided if these prisons were run in a more efficient and humane way than they are today.
Well, let me ask you this question, Mark, if you don't mind. I'm sure there's a list of the states that have these private prisons in it. I was just at a summit about a week ago, and the information that was given across to us is that Illinois does not have any private prisons inside the state. So, how are they spread about? Is it, I know it's 48 contiguous states. How many would you say, if you do know, private
Yeah,
prisons are there?
yeah, you're right about Illinois. Today, there are about 28 states that have at least some people in a private prison. There are states like New Mexico and Montana where as much as 40% of their prison population is held in a private prisons. But then you get more than 20 states like Illinois that haven't embraced that private prison movement yet. And I think that's encouraging, and we need to keep the pressure on those states to maintain that position.
Yeah. I'm looking at the, as we were speaking and we had you on the screen, I was searching through the Sentencing Times issue, the fall 2017 issue, and segueing into momentum continues on raise the age legislation. Let me just take a second and read a little piece of this and then have you give the comment on it. This year marked a milestone with the long-sought passage of raise the age legislation in New York State and North Carolina, the last two states to routinely charge 16-year-olds as if they were adults. By 2019, 16 and 17-year-olds who run afoul of the law in those states will have their cases heard in juvenile courts sharply decreasing collateral consequences resulting from adult arrest records and incarceration. Now, my question is, from the Sentencing Project's perspective, what does that mean for the future? It sounds to me like they're lowering the age to not only fully commit an individual to becoming justice involved, but incarcerating them at an earlier age as well. Can you give me some light on that subject there?
Yeah. Well, a little over 100 years ago, the juvenile court was first established. The first one was in Illinois, and it was set up as a reform under the idea that young people are different than adults. They're not as mature. They're more impulsive. They can't always appreciate the consequences of their actions, and that's why we should treat them differently. So historically, the juvenile court was supposed to be much more rehabilitative in its orientation than the adult court system.
Mm-hmm.
What's happened over time is that in the tough on crime era, uh, lots of states have basically said that rather than setting the age of difference between juvenile and adult at 18, having much lower limits, 17, 16, 15, 14, even younger sometimes. So essentially saying that a 14-year-old can be tried in adult court as if he's an adult, as if he has the capacity to cooperate with his attorney and prepare his defense, to appreciate the consequence of what's happening, and to be subject to adult punishment. So in recent years, finally there's some reconsideration of those policies and a recognition that just because a person 16 may have committed a serious crime doesn't mean that he's irredeemable and can't be helped through that period. So yes, he may be incarcerated for a period of time, but we fool ourselves if we think that a 16-year-old needs to be locked up for 5, 10, 20 years. We know that most people will grow out of those adolescent years and problems if they're given the appropriate supervision, support, services that they need. So we want to raise the age so that it's at least 18. Some people are now saying, well, children's brains aren't fully formed until they're 25 or so in terms of levels of maturity and the like. So maybe we should consider moving even to an older age than that. And that's what that's looking at.
Well, let me take a break here, give you a chance to grab a glass of water or something for just a second. I'm going to comment on what I just heard, and it is a tough situation, ladies and gentlemen, that we have. Those of us who are caught up in the system, those of us who have relatives who are incarcerated behind the system, whether they had been actually convicted or arrested for the crime that they've been charged and convicted of. And it's a complete mess. It really is. But I'm glad we've got you on the phone tonight, Mark Maurer, because what we're doing here is getting some light shed, as well as hopefully spreading the word a little more for individuals who are not necessarily deeply informed, but hopefully this will spark their interest to become a little bit more active in learning about what's going on around them in the community and society, the laws, legislation, politics, and private practices with these prisons. So let me just take a second and give us a little pub right quick, and I'm going to come right back to you. Sure. Inmates for Change. We can be reached at 773-746-3075. Now, that number is to the Inmates for Change offices, and that number is open from 9:30 a.m. until 3:30 p.m., Monday through Friday. However, if those hours don't work well for you, you can give us an email at inmatesforchange@gmail.com. And the website, believe it or not, will be up. We've been experiencing technical difficulties for over a month, and I've still been giving out the website address just so that people could check in to see when we were on. We were up for a few hours and then it fell back down again and then it came back up. So we're at inmatesforchange.org. Now, what I want to do is come back to you, Mr. Marc Maurer, the executive director of the Sentencing Project, and are you the publisher of the Sentencing Times, Mark?
Yes.
Okay. And the publisher of Sentencing Times, is it a periodical or a circular? What is it? A paper?
Well, it's an annual newsletter with an update of our activities and what's happening in the field of criminal justice.
Okay. I'm glad you put that so eloquently for me because, as you see, I'm tripping over my tongue today. And I hope you're not taking any offense to it. It's just, I don't know, nerves. I spoke with you earlier and I was telling you I was sweating like I was going to the electric chair, man.
You sound just fine to me.
Great. Thanks so much. I'm going to move over to the executive director's message. Again, still the same issue of the Sentencing Times fall 2017 issue. Justice Reform Movement Undeterred. And this is your article, Mark. Can you give us something on it? I'm not going to even ask a question on it. I'm just going to allow you to tell us in 6 minutes what the Justice Reform Movement Undeterred is in the executive director's message. Go right ahead.
Sure. Well, many people, of course, have been dismayed about the presidential election last year and the turn back on civil rights and women's rights and social policy generally.
Okay.
And it is true that on Capitol Hill, we had some momentum towards sentencing reform that's really been slowed down this year and makes it more difficult. But as most of you know, criminal justice is largely a state and local issue, not a federal issue. More than 85% of the people behind bars are in a state prison or a local jail. And at the state level, we've seen encouraging developments in the last 5 or 10 years. I think many people are now recognizing how the war on drugs was misguided and a form of overkill and ruining people's lives and their families. So we're beginning to see some reversal of some of the harsh sentencing policies that went along with that. There's growing attention to problem of mandatory sentencing, which takes discretion completely away from judges. And anybody who's been in a courtroom knows that no two defendants and no two crimes are identical. That's why you need to have some discretion available there. And many people, I think, have become energized through the Black Lives Matter movement. Many people have read the new Jim Crow, seen the film 13th, looking at the racial history of incarceration. So we have momentum and I think growing numbers. We see lots of young people wanting to become engaged around challenging mass incarceration. So all that I think is very encouraging, and so far at least, the change in climate come from the White House I don't think has affected those constituencies, and if anything, I think we're seeing more of a movement, more resistance to policies that brought us mass incarceration, and I think we have a lot to build on there.
I hear you, and that was segueing me into the next, just a comment from you. As I'm reading the article as you're speaking, the part where it highlights where the continued struggle lies, and with these developments while these developments are encouraging, they are nonetheless ways in which policy initiatives and political rhetoric emanating from the DOJ, which is, for those of you who do not know, the Department of Justice, may hamper reform. So perhaps most significant is AG Sessions' reluctance to pursue consent decrees with local jurisdictions regarding police misconduct and efforts to improve police-community dialogue. Now, the part of that I wanted to speak on, and as well as directed towards you, we got about 3 minutes left, is with all of that we have, say again how many what's the percentile of state inmates versus
About
federal?
85%.
85%.
Yeah.
And that's across the nation.
Right.
Yeah. Now that's a lot. That's really tough. the thing I see is that our work does continue. And you know, when I was reading this Sentencing Times, I was just blown away by the not only the articulation of the article, but how in depth the research has been, how long you guys have been at it, and you at the forefront seemingly with your tireless efforts. I mean, and being approachable as well. I mean, I just met you about a month ago, and you have accepted the opportunity to come on as a guest and speak and give us an idea about what's going on with the criminal justice reform as well as the industry of reforming the policies that we have. So I want to say thank you so much for taking time out with us, Mark. And again, everyone, we're speaking with Mr. Marc Maurer, the Executive Director of the Sentencing Project, and we were taking excerpts from the Sentencing Times Fall 2017 issue. Those of you who would like to reach Mark, you want to give us a email address for the Sentencing Project, please?
Sure. Well, they can look. Our website is sentencingproject.org, and it's full of information and statistics, and you can look up data for Illinois there. And there's also, you can send comments to us, to our staff, through the website as well, and we'd welcome that, hearing from you and hearing what advocacy groups are doing around the country. So that's sentencingproject.org.
Okay, thank you so much. And in closing, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to say, first of all, thank you, Mark, so much for your time and the information that you gave us. This program has been made possible in part by support from the Mobile Doc. My name is Jones. I'm the founder, CEO of the 501c3 nonprofit Inmates For Change. We offer reentry services to individuals who are returning home from prison, as well as those who are in the community with felony convictions in their background. Thank you again for joining us, and have a great, beautiful night. Take care.